Live from Los Angeles, welcome back to NBA Today.
I hate to use the phrase can't wait because I love to be present in my life, but I cannot wait to play in front of our fans again. I really enjoy being a Warrior. I don't want to come back and be a shell of myself. I want to come back like I was last time I was playing, and I was one of the best players in the world.
Klay Thompson has 11 threes.
I want a championship so bad, more than anything.
I refuse to lose. I got something to prove. I'ma make my move, then I show off. Get ready for the comeback.
I am really excited to get back to balling. I want to win a fourth ring.
So just get ready for the comeback.
So back with us to report more on Klay Thompson is Adrian Wojnarowski. Woj, how close is Klay to returning to the court?
Malika, January is the target now for the Warriors and Klay Thompson, and two key dates to keep an eye on. January 9th against Cleveland, January 18th against Detroit. Both of those games are at home for the Warriors, and the plan is to bring him back with a home game. Now, January 3rd against Miami, I'm told, has not been completely ruled out, but far less likely. And, listen, what Klay Thompson has wanted to do is continue to improve his conditioning. So when he rejoins this team, he's able to go out and really be able to play at the highest possible level and be able to kind of just get on this train moving and not have to just sort of ease his way back in and use his return to necessarily improve his conditioning.
And I'm sure fans are excited to see him back. The Warriors can't wait, especially having players have gone into COVID protocols this week. Woj, is the plan to bring Klay back slowly once he's available?
Well, it's kind of what they're doing right now, Malika. He's well past the rehab. He has rehabbed the injury. It's really about just being able to play, have the endurance. He went down to Santa Cruz, the Warriors G League affiliate, played 3 scrimmage level games. And, he wants to be able to play significant minutes when he comes back. And so, certainly I think there'll be I would imagine you'll see his minutes go up in increments as he returns. But, part of the plan of waiting until January is that, Klay is able to carry a fairly significant load quickly. That's what he's wanted, and certainly it makes sense to Golden State.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Woj. I do want to take a little bit of a closer look now at Klay Thompson's timeline, how he got here. So he was hurt, remember, in Game 6 of the 2019 Finals. That's where he suffered a torn ACL, and then he missed all of the following season. And then in his recovery process last season, as you can see the timeline right here, that's when Klay tore his Achilles. And that caused him to miss all of last season. And then Klay participated in his first full practice back on November 23rd. That was about a full year after tearing his Achilles. And he spent some time then, as Woj mentioned, with the Warriors G League affiliate in Santa Cruz to rehab. But he's now back with the team. He is ramping up. And joining us now to talk more specifically about Klay Thompson's injury and his recovery is ESPN injury analyst and a licensed physical therapist, Stefania Bell. Thank you so much for stopping by, Stefania. So you spoke to Klay's surgeon, that was Dr. Neil Elatrosh. What are some of the benchmarks that Dr. Elatrosh wanted to see Klay hit that gave him confidence that he's going to be ready to return?
Well, one of the things that Dr. Elatrosh has his elite athletes go through before they are cleared to return to play is a biomechanical assessment. He works with a physical therapist. They use cameras to look at body control. Is the trunk, the hip, the knee angles, are they where they should be when he's landing, when he's changing direction? And they also use it as a psychological assessment of readiness to return. There are force plates in the ground that measure how much loading is that injured leg absorbing. Is the athlete willing to land and push off with the same force that you would expect him to normally use in the uninjured side? And so if those things are sound, that gives you confidence in the readiness to return. And Dr. Elatrosh told me he was 100% confident in Klay's biomechanics.
So it's been a long time, Stefania, since we've seen Klay on the court. And to be exact, it's been since June of 2019. So is Klay more at risk now that he's coming back from 2 injuries than coming back from just 1?
You know, you would think so intuitively, but it's really interesting. And Dr. Elatrosh made this point that at this point, the graft that they use when reconstructing the ACL is biologically fully mature. So you can almost discount the ACL component from this and really just focus on the Achilles itself. And because he went through the process of preparing, you know, he was so close to coming back from that torn ACL. He had gone through all that biomechanical training and really kind of set the tone for his for his Achilles rehab, excuse me. So I think that the time delay, as difficult as it was for him as an athlete, he went through all the steps for that first injury, and that probably helped him in his recovery process from the Achilles.
That makes sense. And we've talked so much, Stefania, today about the physical side of his rehab. But what about the mental aspect of Klay's recovery?
It's huge, and I think, Malika, that none of us can really appreciate the toll that being away from your job, from your sport that you love for nearly 2 years can take on someone. And I think it's something that we need to do a better job of addressing in therapy and rehab, but I think we're getting there. And so I think this has been an element of the focus of Klay's return. And Dr. Elatrosh told me, you know, he's got a terrific team around him, that he was very involved in communicating with him along the way. He felt very comfortable with where he was. But Dr. Elatrosh also pointed out that it's hard to imagine and appreciate what it took for this young man to commit to coming back after 2 years. You know, some people might have just quit and walked away, but the dedication to persevere through the grind, through the less exciting aspects of rehab, if you will, to be able to come back shows how much he wants to retake his place in the game. He has dedicated himself to this return, and he's very confident that we're going to see a fantastic Klay when he returns. But he does point out, and we should remember, that you can't expect him to necessarily hit the ground and be exactly the athlete he was when he left. It takes getting back into elite competition and doing it on a consistent basis to really have that full return to performance. But he said, look out, by the end of the regular season, I think you're going to be shocked at how good Klay Thompson looks.
Look out. Well, that's what Adrian Wojnarowski was just telling us, right? Was that the Warriors, they want to see him use some of those early games as a way to kind of continue that ramp-up process. Stefania, thank you so much for spending time with us on NBA Today.
Thanks for having me.
Really appreciate it. All right, coming up on NBA Today, DeMar DeRozan, he dropped 38. That includes 19 in the fourth quarter in a win over the Lakers last night. So has he changed the view of the Bulls in the East? That's next on NBA Today.
If you are what you say you are, a superstar.
James way outside, hits the three. Obviously, I've been scoring a bunch over the last few weeks. To James, the flush.
So here's the news on Lakers big man Anthony Davis. He suffered an MCL sprain in his left knee and is out for 4 weeks. It happened in Friday's loss to the Wolves when Jaden McDaniels, he lost his balance and then he tumbled into Davis's left knee. So AD spoke yesterday and feared it was much more serious. Take a listen.
Reached a point where it's just like, it's tough to walk. So I had to take a break. Like I said, the first thing, I did hear something pop, and the first thing I thought of was, that, which I was emotional. I was just like everywhere, but like I said, thank God that it wasn't that.
So I'm here with Ramona Shelburne, who has more reporting on AD and the Lakers. So Ramona, how are the Lakers planning on filling the void without Anthony Davis for at least the next 4 weeks?
You ready for LeBron James at 5 at the center? Whew. I mean,
I don't know.
He can pretty much do everything, but
he can do it all.
Until Dwight Howard gets back, that's what we're looking at. A small ball Lakers, emphasis on LeBron at the 5. That's going to be fun on Tuesday against DeAndre Ayton when the Phoenix Suns come to town. But, I actually think they're pretty good as a small ball team. I don't know if they like playing that way or if LeBron likes playing in that position, but he can do it. And when you don't have Anthony Davis there and you don't have Dwight Howard as he's still in the health and safety protocols, that's what you're left with.
Well, not only are they shorthanded on the player front, but also on the coaching side, because Lakers head coach Frank Vogel, he's also in the COVID protocols. Assistant coach David Fizdale, he led the bench yesterday's game. So do you have an update, Ramona, on his status?
Yeah, Frank Vogel told me he was pretty much asymptomatic last night, and he was mostly just frustrated he can't be out there with his team. I know they wanted to get the win for him yesterday. Fizz said, everybody, the energy was incredible against the Bulls the other day. They all really wanted to get that win for themselves, but also for Frank, because people feel bad that he's not being able to be out there with him. But he's still texting with him at halftime. He texted him with the coaching staff at halftime. Like, he's very plugged in, but obviously you have to test out of the protocols, and hopefully he remains asymptomatic.
Absolutely. That is absolutely the hope. So I did want to get a notable anniversary in our show, because let's stick with the Lakers. The late, great Kobe Bean Bryant. On this date in 2005, Kobe dropped 62 in 3 quarters against the Mavericks. So, Ramona, what was the buzz like around that performance when he did that back in 2005?
I mean, he was just doing that every night that season. Do you remember? Like, every night it was like, oh, he got 50. Oh, you could see. But this was in 3 quarters. 3 quarters.
I wasn't doing that every night.
And you know what? Like, I understood why he didn't play in the 4th quarter, because they were up, and it was, you have some sports.
Yeah.
He's still upset about it. He was upset about that. I mean, he would have wanted to see how much he can go, but he ended up getting 81 later.
Yeah, a month later, 81.
He got there.
It's light work, and I'm sure our Jalen Rose still thinks about that 81, right?
Like, put Jalen on the map.
Yeah, exactly. Well, rest in power to the great Kobe Bryant. But Ramona, I want to go from a top Kobe moment to the top of the top from this weekend. So, Miss Chene.
What's up, sis?
Can you explain to me, what is a jelly?
Jelly is when you have like a nice little finesse on your shot. So that's when you have a little bit of jelly. It's like, oh, yeah, he laid that up with some jelly.
So the peanut butter, that's the real stuff, and then the jelly is
the jelly's like the extra salt.
All right, then let's do the top jelly. That's the creativity you put on a layup. And PJ Washington, he put the J in jelly on this play.
Let me see this. Oh, yes. It's always nice when you have like one hand and then you reverse it. Let me see this again. Nice one hand. That's jelly. That's almost, it's like filet.
Yeah, but jelly.
Yeah, jelly.
Are you a strawberry or a grape gal?
Oh, I'm both. Jelly's jelly. Jelly jam. Oh, are you jelly or jam?
Oh, jelly. 100%
yeah, jelly all the way.
Grape jelly, none of the seeds. I don't get none of that stuff. All right, let's go to top poster. So yesterday in Toronto, rookie Jonathan Kuminga served up a poster on Chris Boucher.
We both worked the NBA draft, and that was the #1 thing they said about this young man. Athletic, and when he has a motor and desire, you get plays like this. Yeah.
My God.
Oh, man.
Let's see it again.
No jelly there. That's all
That's all peanut butter.
Yeah, that's all peanut butter.
All peanut butter, no jelly.
No jelly.
And then over to Utah, Bradley Beal.
Okay.
I know you don't want to see going over the top of Rudy Gobert.
Well, no, Rudy was like,
Gobert.
He made a business. Rudy Gobert. This was a business decision. You saw him. He's like, I'm good.
I'm good. I know what Brad can do.
Yeah,
I'm gonna let him have
I'm gonna make you a poster. Yeah.
Let's go to top game winner, because in Oklahoma City, with the game on the line, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, he thought he had it the other day. Now he really had it this time. It was just in time.
And I love how he did the victory celebration in honor of Lamar Odom after a summer league game. That's a dance. Hey.
Yeah.
That was it.
I love it.
Way to go, Shai.
Let's see it again.
And he almost had another game winner, but then he got one up.
I know, but this is the real one. It's the revenge. It's revenge against the Clippers,
I was here for this. Yes, great dance.
Here for this.
Great game winner, even better post-game winner dance.
Yeah. That would make the NFL proud, I think.
Very true.
Yeah, I admire those types of.
Not going too hard, but hard enough.
Exactly. Just put it like a little jelly on the dance. Can you do that?
Yeah, he put a little jelly.
Yeah, he put a little jelly in there. All right, coming up, we got more jelly on NBA Today. How close is Klay Thompson to returning to the court? We have a few special guests to tell us all about that and his next steps. And what has DeMar DeRozan meant to the Bulls this season? We'll discuss the impact on the resurgent team in the Windy City. And what is troubling the Sixers right now? Tim Bontemps stops by with a full update. NBA Today. We'll be right back.
From Los Angeles.
Coming up on NBA Today, the Nets are bringing back Kyrie Irving as a part-time player. Was that the right call for Brooklyn? And the Lakers will be without Anthony Davis for at least a month. What's their plan to stay afloat in his absence? Plus, we'll take a deep dive on Klay Thompson as he is set to return to the court as that date approaches. How big will his impact be? That and more on NBA Today. Welcome to NBA Today. I'm Malika Andrews, joined in our LA studio by senior writer Ramona Shelburne and two-time WNBA All-Star Chiney Agumake. So reporters are going to be joining us throughout the show. There is so much news to get to, but I want to start with the news of games being postponed. So yesterday, the NBA announced that 5 games would be postponed this week due to a spike in coronavirus cases. That included 3 games last night and tonight's Magic at Raptors and tomorrow's Wizards at Nets. So for more news on this, I do want to start by bringing in our senior NBA insider, Adrian Wojnarowski. Woj, what led to the league's decision to postpone these games?
Well, Malik, ultimately the outbreaks on these teams and the fact that these teams are testing everybody. And when you're testing everybody right now, chances are you're going to come back with a number of positive cases. And that was the situation in Cleveland and obviously continues to be in Brooklyn. You're seeing now what's happening in Minnesota. You know, when you see one case, you know, very often more are going to follow. And, you know, the league, you know, they have a minimum of 8 healthy players to play in games. And, you know, Philadelphia is certainly another one. They just added Tyler Johnson on a hardship exemption to try to get enough players to be able to continue this week. But this is the reality of the league right now. They've wanted to avoid postponements as much as they can. Chicago had 2 last week, and then you saw a rash of postponements yesterday. You know, that will play out here over the next couple days.
So, Woj, you mentioned hardship exceptions. What rules has the league put in place to try to alleviate teams playing with shorthanded rosters?
Well, you know, what the league doesn't want is to have teams floating around that 7, 8, 9 player availability and be in a position where they have to postpone the games. And so, you know, they put in some mandatory rules, you know, that are going to force teams when they have players in COVID, you know, there's a minimum amount of players that you have to bring in for each player you lose to COVID. And you can bring in as many as 1 player for each loss. And equally as important to teams, it's not going to count against their salary cap, their luxury tax. So there's really not a financial penalty for bringing on players amid an outbreak, amid positive tests. It wasn't really designed to be punitive financially, but that's what was starting to play out. And so teams like Brooklyn, who are deep into the tax, won't have to pay that price for it.
And speaking of bringing players back, on Friday you reported that the Nets would be bringing back Kyrie Irving as a part-time player. So how did they arrive at this decision?
They want to win a championship, Malika, and their window is tight. Kevin Durant certainly is at the apex of his talents, but they have James Harden, Kyrie Irving, both could be in free agency, and a roster that's been depleted, not just by COVID, you know, certainly injuries. Joe Harris has been out, and of course, you know, they're really concerned about the minutes and the physical tax that Kevin Durant has had to go through this year. And what didn't make sense to them a couple months ago made sense now, to just have Kyrie Irving, even if it's going to just be for the road games, and that's the plan. He's shown no indication that he's going to get vaccinated and be able to play in New York, but to just allow him, you know, to be able to help them get a 1 seed, to carry the load offensively, certainly, and all those things he brings. Listen, in the end, the questions they had about team chemistry and what it would mean in the locker room to have a part-time player, they got over those quick when they looked at the landscape and realized if we're going to win a championship, even on a part-time basis, Kyrie Irving can help us do that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that insight, Woj. Really appreciate it. And for everyone who's watching, Adam Silver, he's going to be joining the show tomorrow to provide some more answers on what the league is facing with COVID. But I do want to elaborate on this a little bit more with you. And Chiney, I want to start with you. What is your reaction here to how the league is handling the current wave of COVID cases?
First, not to make light of this situation, but I'm today years old to realize that Woj's background is not real. I was sad to see his background. I was like, oh, it's not real. But he held it down. This circumstance is really, you know, as a player, I know what it was like to go through a season where you had to be tested and there were a lot of concerns. And it feels like, you know, for me, this was this past summer. It feels like you're back to that heightened sense of anything can happen. And, you know, going into a season, we knew that these were the possibilities. Again, I'm a member of the WNBPA, the vice president, and we have contingency plans. And I loved how the union was fighting for more testing so that teams can plan. And finally, we see over the weekend how these plans are rolling out where you can sign more players, two-way players. There's no limit on them. So I like this. With regard to Kyrie Irving, though, this is inevitable in that regard, just because, you know, you come to a point where, all right, we have the luxury of having multiple players and we can build without you. Now it's a disservice to the team if you don't have if you have a player that's available that can play, you need him now more than ever. So I'm not surprised.
Absolutely. And we're going to get back to Kyrie Irving a little bit more in just a moment. But Ramona, I do want to get your reaction to how the league is handling these cases, because as Baxter Holmes has noted in his reporting, this is a significant spike that we're seeing, even more so than sort of the initial wave when the league was shut down.
Well, and Malika, you know, the league has always been kind of at the forefront of testing and sequencing. They actually sequence every test, and there is a lag time in terms of how long it takes to come back. But the understanding around the league is that this is the Omicron variant that is spurring this spike, just like it is all over the world. Now, some of the results of all the numbers of Omicron are still, there's a lag here, but that's what the understanding of a lot of players and people in this league are, is that this is what we're seeing in the world. And the NBA, in a lot of ways, is the canary in the coal mine. I mean, they see this first because they're testing for it more. And I think the big thing that Woj just reported yesterday, which I'm not sure people capture how important this is, teams have to sign a player to replace someone who tests positive for COVID. There were teams out there, Malika, that would forfeit a game before they signed another player because of the impact on luxury taxes. And I mean, you have a team like, let's say Miami, $180,000 below the luxury tax. You sign one player, now you're over the luxury tax, and that changes the way you construct your roster. Well, it was a fairly easy thing for the players union and the other owners to agree to, which is if we want to have games, if we want to have rosters, that we don't postpone games, if we don't shut teams down for a certain length of time, we have to make it so it's not punitive luxury tax-wise. And I think that was really important that they agreed to that. That, to me, was a signal that the NBA is going to continue on.
Well,
get your G League team ready.
Sports mirror society, right? And we're seeing this spike not just in the NBA, but all over the country and the world. I do, though, Chiney, want to get back to Kyrie Irving because Nets general manager Sean Marks, he spoke about the team's decision to bring him back over the weekend. So take a listen.
Several months ago, we made a decision that was based around what was best for the team. What was best for the team at that point was continuity. And I think we all see that continuity right now over the course of the last week, and, you know, whatever the future looks like, may be out of the window for a while. And we've got to navigate that as best we can. We're sitting here faced with a roster that has been decimated over the course of the last several days. And I'm forced to make decisions. When you have an opportunity to add a player like this at a juncture like this when dealing with unforeseen circumstances, this is the best decision for this team at this juncture right now, that what we're dealing with.
Has Kyrie given you any indication now that he's back in the fold that maybe he might consider getting vaccinated down the road?
I have not talked to Kyrie about vaccination status. I don't think that's been appropriate right now. And when he gets back here, I'm sure he'll have conversations, whether it was myself and Steve or his players and so forth. But, you know, I want to get him back in the fold, and, you know, we'll navigate those conversations then.
Well, I think those conversations are always appropriate to navigate. But Ramona, bringing back Kyrie Irving as a part-time player, is that the right call for the Nets?
I think right now this was an imperative for them just because of the minutes that James Harden and Kevin Durant were playing. And I think this really came from the other players within the organization saying, we need him. Just flat out need him. And if you look at their schedule coming up, you know, I don't know how helpful he's going to be to them because, as you know, he was placed into the health and safety protocols almost immediately. And so he has to return 5 consecutive negative tests, but now that he's in the protocols. But look at their schedule coming up. I mean, they have a lot of home games where if he doesn't play on this upcoming 3-game road trip that they have, then he won't be available to them until pretty much the middle of January.
Well, and Sean Marks did say that this was a collaborative decision. There is the schedule that we're looking at. So you see they play at Portland, at LA, at the Clippers, but then they have quite a handful of home games, Chiney.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I know a lot of people will see like, oh, how is this going to work out immediately? I think this is a long game decision, knowing that this is something that the league is going to have to balance for the next few months. You know, trying to find some form of stability with rosters while navigating the situation we're in currently. So I actually circled after Christmas 2 home games until January 15th. But then after that, late January, 11 of 14 games on the road. And when we talked about Kyrie Irving earlier in the season, we're like, well, he could be available for this circumstance. circumstance, I think things are so dire right now for roster construction that you have to look. That's probably our better chance of maintaining our position, because at the end of the day, they're in the winning business, right? They're number one in the East, and if you are having guys like Kevin Durant take extended minutes, you don't want to put everyone else at risk. Now, I know risk is a question when it comes to Kyrie, but when you're thinking about teams, it absolutely, Ramona, you're right. It comes to the players. At some point, you're like, can we actually have him? Like, it's going to hurt us at this point more than we even expected.
Well, and Woj mentioned it. It's about winning a championship. That's the number one thing driving. This is the business of basketball. But at the same time, you have to recognize, Sean Marks, he did say when he was asked whether or not this is going to be something that's going to be going on all season long, or whether or not when they get players back, they're going to revert back to saying, okay, Kyrie, thank you for your service, not so much. To me, that seems like once you've squeezed the toothpaste out of the tube, it's going to be very hard to put back in. But Sean Marks didn't commit to have him for the rest of the season, at least not yet. You sort of have to read the tea leaves there. It is important to note that Joe Tsai has been a fierce advocate for the vaccine and for getting vaccinated. And so not only is this a shift basketball-wise that makes a ton of sense, by the way. They had an all-star on the bench that they can then bring in. How many teams that are decimated by COVID right now have that opportunity? That makes sense. But the shift in sort of the messaging there, that's something that I am curious to see continue, because we know what works here, and that's masking, testing, and vaccines. And after Christmas, the league is going to require testing again. But coming up on NBA Today, we have more to talk about. The Lakers, how can they make up for the loss of Anthony Davis? Hey, Ramona, she has the details on that. And on this date, in 2005, Kobe Bryant, he did Kobe Bryant things. So we'll take a look back at a notable anniversary from the Mamba. Plus, DeMar DeRozan, he dropped 38 in his return from health and safety protocols. So what has he meant to the Bulls? You're watching NBA Today.
NBA Today, live from Los Angeles.
So the annual NBA on Christmas Day tradition continues with 5 of the best gifts that anyone could ask for. The schedule starts at noon Eastern on ESPN with the Hawks and the Knicks, and then over to ABC, it's Celtics Bucks and Warriors Suns. I'll be on the sidelines for that one. Nets Lakers is on ABC and ESPN, and then the day caps off by the Mavs and the Jazz. That's at 10:30 Eastern. What a Christmas Day lineup it will be. But before we get there, let's go coast to coast on this weekend's action, and let's start with Kemba Walker, who, remember, after falling out of the Knicks rotation, he didn't play in 10 straight games. Then he balled out 37 minutes at Boston, dropped a season-high 29 points. So, Shanae, should the Knicks put him back in the rotation?
He's the definition this weekend of stay ready so you don't have to get ready. I think it's an interesting argument that they have to deal with, because they're 10-9 with him in the lineup, and then 3 of 8 as of late without him in the lineup. So I think he made a good case for himself. Oh, good. I'm a poet and you don't even know it. He made a good case for himself, and I like the revenge game as well.
Absolutely. And with so many players in COVID protocols, they may not have a choice. Devin Booker, he returned last night after missing the last 7 games with a hamstring injury, 16 in 26 minutes. So the Suns went 5-2 in his absence. Ramona, how do he look to you?
I thought he looked pretty good. Obviously limited minutes here, which is smart when you're coming back from a hamstring injury. You do not want to re-injure that, but they have the luxury of giving him limited minutes and sitting out those 7 games.
Absolutely, and Book, he just wants to be on the floor. To some WNBA
Look at my girl,
news.
the
Washington Mystics, they landed the #1 pick in Sunday's lottery. It's the second time they'll choose first. The other was in 1999 when they took Tamika Holdsclaw. Janae, is
this ain't fair.
Okay, so
by the way, Ramona Stanford, Bethany,
that's what I'm saying.
That ain't fair. Third best odds first pick. They won a championship a few years ago. Come on now.
All right, well then, come on now. DeMar DeRozan came back after going through COVID protocols. DeRozan scored 38 points for the second time against the Lakers this season. He's been huge for this team all season long. And speaking of DeRozan, look at the impact that he's had on the Bulls this season. When he's on the court, the team's defensive efficiency would be the second best in the NBA. And then on the offensive efficiency.
Impressive.
And then, Ramona, let's go over to the offensive end. And their efficiency is nearly 9 points better when he is playing. So now joining us is our senior writer for The Undefeated, Mark Spears. Mark, we've been talking about DeMar DeRozan, the impact he's had. How important has this free agency acquisition been for the Bulls?
Well, it's not only important for the Bulls, but it's important for him. He was playing in Canada, although he was great in Canada. Us Americans tend not to pay attention enough, right? Then he's in San Antonio, kind of out of the spotlight there. But this is the biggest spotlight he's had in his career, being in Chicago. And right now, he's fourth in the NBA in scoring, 26 points a game. It's also big for the Bulls because now they have a superstar trio with him and Levine, who's hopefully will be back soon, and Vucevic, who we don't give enough credit to. This is a great, great three-man star rotation. And he told me about a month ago, he's like, one thing he loves about the Bulls is nobody is selfish. Everyone wants to go out there and have fun. And also shout out to Mark Eversley, who worked with him in Toronto and went to LA, talked to DeRozan face-to-face, and convinced him to come to Chicago.
Well, and then we saw Zach LaVine fire off a tweet literally as the game was ending, complimenting DeMar DeRozan. And then, a little typo, but that's okay, Zach. We all make them. So, like you said, hopefully Zach LaVine is back soon. I do want to then go over to Detroit because rookie Cade Cunningham, he had 10 assists. That's not easy in a win over the Heat yesterday. So is he starting to put his name in the Rookie of the Year race after missing a little bit of time early this season?
I need the folks out there to pay attention to this diary I'm doing with Cade. He's talking a little trash and backing it up. About a month ago, he said, yeah, y'all thought I was a bust. And I thought that was pretty funny. Remember that slow start he had after having an ankle injury? Well, he's been killing it in December. He's averaging 19 points, 5 rebounds, 6 assists, and nearly 2 steals. And he's also shooting 42% from three-point range. Jeremy Grant is gone for going to be out a while with a thumb injury. And dare I say now he's starting to move into the Rookie of the Year conversation. I know there's a guy in Toronto and Cleveland would probably want to say otherwise right now. But, hey, Cade Cunningham is living up to the billing. He's been a superstar of late, especially in December with the Pistons.
Well, it'll be fun to continue to watch his game mature. And absolutely, you mentioned your diaries. I will be tuning into those on The Undefeated. Thank you so much for joining us, Mark. I do want to go back to one of the first things that Mark said. I'm rejoined now by Ramona and Shanae. I want to talk more about DeMar DeRozan. What has his impact been, Ramona, on this Bulls team?
I mean, he's that veteran leader, that veteran scorer, but he comes up big in the fourth quarter. He had 19 points in the fourth quarter yesterday. He's averaging 8.5 points in the fourth quarter. That's the most of any player in the NBA this year. And when you have a guy who's a veteran player like that who can deliver in the clutch, that's huge for a young team that's trying to learn how to win.
How annoying. You stole my nugget, my note. I guess we're supposed to share homework if we both come from Stanford. I absolutely agree. The fourth quarter is where he's feeling his most confident self. And I think, early in the year, before they had their issues with COVID and players were unavailable, he was right there in the mix for MVP discussion. What I will bring up is I think at some point when you're a player, you realize, all right, I'm great. I'm good at this. Like the mid-range was my bag. But you have to bring different facets of the game that can sort of galvanize your team. In Toronto, we saw his strengths, but now we're seeing his impact on a team overall for the Chicago Bulls. And I think that subtle change in his mindset defensively, like I'm going to go with the guy like Caruso and making sure we have a rim protect, like that subtle change as a veteran has really changed the outlook of his career.
Well, and when you think back to the offseason when the Bulls acquired DeMar DeRozan, the chatter that was surrounding that acquisition was, is this the worst possible acquisition of the offseason? Does this fit make any sense at all? Remember that, though, right? That was the conversations that was being had. And now, I mean, you mentioned MVP. Is DeRozan hovering in the top 5 MVP?
I think adjacent, but like right up in the mix.
Top 5 adjacent.
When he's top 10.
Top 10.
Yeah.
There's not 10.
The problem is that he's been unavailable.
Go that deep.
He's been unavailable, but now he's back, and he can make the case himself. And I think you're absolutely right when it comes to the free agency discussions that we had, because Ramona, correct me, what was it, 38-6, right, against the Lakers that you mentioned in those 2 games against them? I mean, wasn't he sort of vying, Ramona, correct me if I'm wrong, to try to be on the Lakers in the free agency summer?
I mean, there was a time over the summer when everyone in LA thought DeMar was going to be a Laker. They were going to find a way to do it. Now, the mechanics of it and the financials of it, there's some dispute over it. I don't think he was ever going to take that mid-level exception that people thought he would come for. He ended up getting $85 million from
is playing
the Bulls.
For every penny of that $85
But then,
million.
like, when you're an LA guy and this is a dream of yours and you don't get that and people have concerns about your career, is he a right fit for X, Y, or Z team? That's what's motivated him to play so well in Chicago. And so sometimes it's not the team that you want to go to, it's a team that wants you and needs you. You hear that a lot of times when it comes to young players in the draft, like, oh, I wanted to go here, I want to go there. Like, the reality is the team that needs you and wants you, that's the best position for you, and that seems to be Chicago.
Well, and Zach LaVine was on the show the first week of NBA Today saying how confident he was in this roster. And I think at that time there were still some folks saying, You sure? Really? What about the fit? There seems to be some redundancy on this roster. And now, when you see the way that Lonzo Ball, when you see the way that Zach LaVine, when you see the way that DeMar DeRozan and Alex Caruso, you go down the list, have been gelling and playing together, especially with the woes that they had, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
But let's go from some Eastern highs to some Eastern woes. Because coming up, the 76ers, what is troubling them right now? Tim Bontemps will join us for a little check-in on the Sixers and Celtics. That's
Always
next.
something with those guys.
Always something.
Is host of NBA Today, and this Tuesday, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver will join me live at 3 o'clock Eastern, and we'll talk about the NBA's star-studded Christmas Day games and all of the exciting matchups, plus how the league is handling COVID health and safety protocols. You won't want to miss Silver's comments this Tuesday at 3 Eastern on NBA Today. Welcome back to NBA Today. Now bringing in reporter Tim Bontemps. You cover the Celtics, the Sixers, and all of the Eastern Conference for us. So, Tim, in previous years, we've looked at the Sixers and the Celtics matchup as a potential Eastern Conference Finals preview. But today, both teams are struggling well beyond losing multiple players to health and safety protocols. So just to start, who is playing tonight?
Well, that's a good question, Malika, because there's a bunch of guys on both sides that are not going to be in, but here's who is going to play most likely. Joel Embiid is questionable with an injury, and Jason Tatum is questionable with an injury. They should both be on the court. Dennis Schroeder, who missed the last game with a non-COVID illness, he should be on the court. But no Al Horford, no Andre Drummond, no Shake Milton, no George Niang, no Josh Richardson. Both these teams are going to be down a bunch of guys, and what is a critical game for both these teams is, as you mentioned, they both come into this game reeling a little bit and trying to find themselves after what's been a pretty rough start.
So down at least 5 players. Tim, after the hot start that Philadelphia that you mentioned, they've dropped to 500 this season. So beyond the obvious problem of not having Ben Simmons, what is troubling the Sixers?
Well, like you said, Malika, the Ben Simmons situation, as we've talked about so many times on this show, has hung over this team from the beginning of the year, right? But if you look at Philly overall, obviously Joel Embiid going out with COVID sent them on this slide to begin with, but overall, the Sixers team just does not have a lot of two-way players, and they don't have much offensive production outside of in Joel Embiid, who obviously is one of the best players in the league. Tobias Harris last year shot 39.9% from three. This year, he's shooting 29.9% from three. And you go across the board, shot percentages are down. Obviously, Ben Simmons not being there gets a lot less wide open looks for guys, which hurts things. But on top of that, you have guys like Matisse Thybulle, for example. He shuts down Steph Curry in one game, and then against the Miami Heat, he misses a bunch of threes. He isn't guarded and helps contribute to a loss. And that kind of back and forth imbalance on the roster is a big reason why Philly finds itself sitting at 500 going into tonight's game.
Well, let's go to the other side of this matchup, because it's not just Philly that's struggling. After being incredibly stable for years, the Celtics, they changed their front office, they changed their coach after last season, but they're still hovering around 500. So what has caused them to struggle?
Well, the Celtics have had a bunch of injuries this year. Jaylen Brown, who's finally back, one of the guys who's actually going to play tonight, he's missed a bunch of the year with hamstring injuries. And when he and Jason Tatum have been on the court, the Celtics have been 6 or 7 points per 100 possessions better than their opponents. So there is the core of a good team here. But at the end of the day, the Celtics just really struggle to generate consistent, good offense. And a lot of that's because they have a lot of guys who are not really pass-first players. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, as we've talked about a bunch, are still learning to play that way. Dennis Schroeder is not really a pass-first guy. He's more of an attack and score guy. Same with Josh Richardson. Same with Marcus Smart. So a lot of time when they get into half-court settings, it's a lot of holding the ball and moving it around without really generating open looks for other guys. It's been a consistent theme for them all year, and while their defense has been really good, their offensive issues at the other end is part of what's got them, again, like the Sixers, sitting at 500 and heading into what's a pretty important game for both these teams tonight.
Well, and Ime Udoka has talked about the need for them to play sort of on both sides of the ball consistently. Tim, thank you so much for joining us. I do want to bring Chiney back in here and stick with the Celtics, because, Chiney, we just heard Tim Bontemps talk about whether or not Jason Tatum, maybe they'll have him tonight. Jaylen Brown, they will have him tonight. We know the Celtics, their goals are clear. They have been for years, but they are 500, and right now they're outside of the top 6 in the East. So do you see them this season avoiding the play-in tournament?
Well, I was very happy to see recently Jaylen Brown return, because he is the major X factor. But if you look at the standings right now, they're currently number 8. There are some teams in there. Let me circle them mentally. The Hornets, the Wizards, and even the Cavs. Shocker, Cavs at 3, all right? Bucks, Heat, Nets, those are all, teams that we don't really worry about when it comes to the playoffs and the play-in. Bulls, interesting, but like the Hornets, the Wizards, those are teams that they can look and say like, hey, if we actually get our guys back on the court more consistently. The last time out, Tatum 25, Jaylen Brown 23. They've had some tough losses as of late, to the Warriors, to the Suns, but the realistic aspect is you knock out those losses, you're going to have better, more favorable opponents moving forward. I absolutely think the Celtics can get their stuff together and put themselves in a position to not be in the play-in. Avoid the play-in at all costs.
Right.
That's the mentality.